The evolutionist J.B.S. Haldane, one of the main founders of population genetics, when asked what would convince him that evolution was false, replied that finding a rabbit fossil in the Pre-Cambrian rocks would do quite nicely. Richard Dawkins, following in Haldane's footsteps, stated, however, if there was a single hippo or rabbit in the Pre-Cambrian, that would completely blow evolution out of the water. None have ever been found. Yet, a Pre-Cambrian rabbit or hippo, as William Dembski relates in the following article, which you can read at your own leisure, would not falsify universal common descent of neo-Darwinian evolution. Even a Darwinist in the following article, which you can also read at your own leisure, admitted that a Pre-Cambrian rabbit would not falsify Darwinian evolution. The claim that a Pre-Cambrian rabbit would falsify universal common descent was an interesting claim for Haldane and Richard Dawkins to make for two reasons. One reason is that, by all rights, the Cambrian explosion should be more than enough to falsify the hypothesis of universal common descent. Here's a short video clip by Dr. Stephen Meyer on the challenge that the Cambrian explosion presents to Darwinian evolution.
The Cambrian explosion challenged the two main propositions of Darwinian evolution, the two main distinctive ideas that Darwin was putting forward. And I label them evolution number 2 and evolution number 3 because they're both called evolution, but these are different meanings than just change over time. The first of those meanings was Darwin's idea of universal common ancestry or universal common descent. And that's the idea that all of the living forms that exist today are related by common ancestry. They have descended gradually from simpler pre-existing forms of life such that the history of life forms a great branching tree. And that was his theory of the history of life was depicted with this tree-like diagram. So the idea is that all organisms come from a single common ancestor way, way back, probably a simple one-celled organism of some kind, and that the best picture of the history of life is this tree, such that all of the forms of life that exist today, the giraffes and the kangaroos and the tropical fish and the turtles and anything you would like to name, the insects in your backyard, are all related to each other by a pattern of descent, that they share common ancestry if you go far enough back, okay? Now, inherent in this picture is the idea of gradual and continuous change. Evolution in its simplest meaning just means change over time. But Darwin was stipulating that the change that had taken place from those earlier strata where we could see that life was different was continuous, that everything was in some way connected, and that change had taken place gradually. So the Cambrian explosion is right out of the blocks a challenge to that part of Darwinian theory, that meaning of evolution, because it seems to be documenting not gradual, continuous change, but rather sudden, discontinuous change. Okay? And Darwin was troubled by this, and understandably so.
The second reason that his claim that a Pre-Cambrian rabbit would falsify universal common descent was an interesting claim for J.B.S. Haldane to make is that Haldane, as mentioned previously, was one of the founders of population genetics. And population genetics had, supposedly, finally given Darwinian evolution some semblance of mathematical respectability, which it had been lacking since its inception in the mid-19th century. Yet here, with the Pre-Cambrian rabbit example, Haldane was basically punting on the math and was not offering to put the mathematics of population genetics up for the testing like other overarching theories of science put their math up for testing. David Berlinski puts the untestable situation with Darwinian claims like this. On the other hand, I disagree that Darwin's theory is solid as any explanation in science. Disagree? I regard the claim as preposterous. Quantum electrodynamics is accurate to 13 or so decimal places. So too general relativity. A leaf trembling in the wrong way would suffice to shatter either theory. What can Darwinian theory offer in comparison? And without such a rigid falsification criteria based in math, as other overarching theories of science have, Darwinian evolution does not even qualify as a hard science in the first place, but is, in reality, more properly classified as a pseudoscience. Karl Popper states this in regards to the falsifiability of a theory and its statuses in science. Insofar as a scientific statement speaks about reality, it must be falsifiable, and insofar as it is not falsifiable, it does not speak about reality. More interesting still to the fact that Haldane did not submit the math of population genetics to empirical testing, but instead submitted a Pre-Cambrian rabbit as a supposed test, is the fact that population genetics, from Haldane's own work and from subsequent work by others, had basically cast natural selection, which was Charles Darwin's main claim to fame in science, under the bus. In the following quote, which you can read at your own leisure, John Sanford comments on Haldane's dilemma. And in the following quote, which you can again read at your own leisure, John Sanford comments on Kimura's furtherance of Haldane's work in population genetics, which undermined natural selection. In other words, neutral theory and the concept of junk DNA was not developed because of any empirical observation in science, but was actually developed because it was forced upon Darwinists by the mathematics of population genetics. In plain English, neutral theory and the concept of junk DNA itself is actually the result of a theoretical failure of Darwinian theory within the mathematics of population genetics. It is also interesting and important to point out that neutral theory effectively casts what is considered to be Charles Darwin's main contribution to science, natural selection itself, under a bus. Here are a few comments on that to that effect. And without natural selection as a major player in evolution, basically all that is left of Darwin's original theory is effectively blind random chance all by itself. A blogger named William J. Murray, upon realizing what neutral theory actually meant for Darwin's original theory, commented, "One wonders what would have become of evolution had Darwin originally claimed that it was simply the accumulation of random neutral variations that generated all the deeply complex, organized, interdependent structures we find in biology. Would we even know his name today? what exactly is Darwin really famous for now? Advancing a really popular and now disproven idea of natural selection along the lines of lumos spurius ether, without the erroneous but powerful meme of survival of the fittest to act as an opiate for the Victorian intelligentsia and as a rationale for 20th century fascism. How might history have proceeded under the influence of the less Victrolic maxim, survival of the happenstance? Here are a few more quotes which you can also read at your own leisure that are along the same lines. And furthermore, besides casting natural selection under the bus as a major player in evolutionary theory, the mathematics of population genetics has not been kind to Darwin's theory in the least. For example, in this recent peer-reviewed paper, which you can read at your own leisure, John Seppard and Company comment on the insurmountable waiting time problem that the mathematics of population genetics presents for Darwinian explanations. And here is a site which has many more peer-reviewed references by John Seppard and Company, which falsify Darwinian explanations from numerous different angles within the mathematics of population genetics. Moreover, as if casting natural selection under the bus by the mathematics of population genetics was not enough to falsify Darwinian evolution outright, the mathematics of population genetics recently went one step further and proved that if Darwinian evolution were true, then all of our perception of reality would not be real but would be illusory. In the following video, David Hoffman states it as such.
So this raises an important technical question. Does natural selection really favor seeing reality as it is? Fortunately, we don't have to wave our hands and guess. Evolution is a mathematically precise theory. We can use the equations of evolution to check this out. We can have various organisms in artificial worlds compete and see which survive and which thrive, which sensory systems are more fit. A key notion in those equations is fitness. Consider this steak. What does this steak do for the fitness of an animal? Well, for a hungry lion looking to eat, it enhances fitness. For a well-fed lion looking to mate, it doesn't enhance fitness. And for a rabbit in any state, it doesn't enhance fitness. So fitness does depend on reality as it is, yes, but also on the organism, its state, and its action. Fitness is not the same thing as reality as it is, and it's fitness and not reality as it is that figures centrally in the equations of evolution. So in my lab, we have run hundreds of thousands of evolutionary game simulations with lots of different randomly chosen worlds and organisms that compete for resources in those worlds. Some of the organisms see all of the reality, others see just part of the reality, and some see none of the reality, only fitness. Who wins? Well, I hate to break it to you, but perception of reality goes extinct. In almost every simulation, organisms that see none of reality but are just tuned to fitness drive to extinction all the organisms that perceive reality as it is. So the bottom line is evolution does not favor vertical or accurate perceptions. Those perceptions of reality go extinct. Now this is a bit stunning. how can it be that not seeing the world accurately gives us a survival advantage? That is a bit counterintuitive.
And here is another paper which you can read at your own leisure, which further illustrates David Hoffman's point. Of related interest to the mathematics of population genetics, showing that if Darwinian evolution were true, all of our observation of reality would be illusory. It's important to note that reliable observation of reality is a necessary cornerstone of the scientific method itself. Thus, in what should be needless to say, a worldview that undermines the scientific method itself by holding all of our observations of reality are illusory is not a worldview that can be firmly grounded within the scientific method. Moreover, completely contrary to the mathematics of population, conscious observation, far from being illusory as is held in Darwinian thinking, is experimentally found to be far more integral to reality, far more reliable of reality than the mathematics of population genetics predicted. In fact, in the following experiment, it was found that reality doesn't even exist without an observer. Apparently, science itself could care less if Darwinian atheists are forced to believe, because of the mathematics of population genetics, that their observations of reality are illusory. Thus, in conclusion, Darwinists basically ignore any empirical evidence that might falsify their belief in universal common descent, such as the Cambrian explosion itself, and furthermore, as in the case of J.B.S. Heldon, they even ignore what their very own math is telling them about Darwinian theory. Namely, that Darwinian evolution is, to borrow Wolfgang Pauli's phrase, not even wrong as far as the math of itself is concerned. And that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.